Check. Oh, there we go. Good evening, DSU student body and faculty. This evening we will be presenting the debate for the position of president. I am your moderator for the evening, Mark Joycey. Before we get started, here are a few announcements. First and most important, we recognize that we are holding this debate on unceded, unsurrendered Mi'kmaq land. Second, we would like to thank the sub for allowing us to host this debate in this space, as well as the tech crew for allowing it to be broadcasted to the rest of the campus. Third announcement is we do have a fifth candidate, Mary McDonald. She will be joining us later. Tonight, this debate is about the discussion of ideas and actions that help make the DSU, and more importantly, the students, have a positive time here at Dalhousie University. Each candidate here is running to help improve the well-being of all students here at Dal. There will be agreement and disagreement here on stage on how to reach these objectives. Candidates have every right to disagree and argue about ideas and actions, and we encourage healthy debate. We do not encourage attacks on each other or other groups of people in a way that is discriminatory or offensive. Those who attempt to engage in this behavior, including those in the audience as deemed by the moderator or members of elections committee, will not be tolerated. In addition, candidates must address the moderator in their responses. Candidates cannot engage other candidates or members of the audience. Candidates are not to cut off other candidates and must wait for the moderator to address questions to them. Questions will be taken from the audience and read by the moderator. Questions can also be submitted in advance via this online forum. Audience are to be silent except for cheering or clapping. Spokespeople for referendum campaigns can opt to deliver a short speech before the commencement of the debates. All candidates are obligated to follow university policy as well as municipal, provincial, and federal laws in the course of campaigning as per DSU elections policy. Now on to the debate itself. All candidates will have read the rules for the debate and agreed upon them before participating. Candidates will get 2 minutes max for opening statements. Questions will be asked by myself based on questions I have written or been presented to me by the student body. A question will be asked to one of the candidates. The candidate will get 60 seconds to respond. Every other candidate will get 60 seconds to rebuttal or respond. There will be a max 5-minute discussion between the candidates on the issue of the questions. Candidates will be respectful to others during this speaking time. Now, I understand that we have those from CKDU and I want to make this right, NSberg to speak for the referendum. If one of them would like to come up now and speak, they are more than welcome to. About 2 minutes. If you have any questions for CKDU, you can go up and see them. They will be seated over there. Yes, they'll be seated over there. Thank you. Next up, we have someone from Ennisburg to speak.
Thanks. I don't have a radio voice, so I'm going to use the mic. That's right. My name's Clark. I'm from Ennisburg. That's the Nova Scotia Public Interest Research Group. We are a Levy Society both here and at King's. Basically, we are a student-led social and environmental justice resource center. That's a huge, all-encompassing thing. We realize that. That is our mandate, and it's huge and all-encompassing. And that's why we are here running a levy campaign, because we've kind of tapped out our capacity right now, and we're really hoping that we can expand our programming and do more and put more back into student programming and also improve student jobs on campus and social environmental justice initiatives. So we're asking for a small levy increase from $3 a semester to $4.50. And what would we do with that? Well, we want to increase our staff capacity. So that includes both making our current staff full-time so that we're more available to students, as well as making a student part-time job at living wage, which is $19.10 an hour in Nova Scotia. We also want to further develop our student research funding. So right now, we have student research funding where if there's a project that comes up that we would like to see some research on, we get a student to do it. And right now we've got folks that are working with policy review of student charters at the U15 schools, some inclusive curricula work, but really we want to expand beyond that. So if students, we know that students are doing all kinds of amazing research on campus in their courses. We know that there's a lot of expenses that come with that come out of pocket. So for students that are doing work that relates to social and environmental justice, we want to be able to be there as a support to them so that expenses that come out of their pocket, they can come to us and apply for reimbursement for those. So like paying participants in focus group studies, things like that. We want to be able to help with that kind of work and expand that work on campus. Also, we want to be able to increase our working group capacity. So right now we've got a few different working groups, including Divest DAO, Squish, which is one that we're working on to create an LGBTQ-based drop-in basketball league, and also the Racialized Student Academic Network. Some of our previous working groups, well, our main previous working group that I'm sure everybody here knows about because they're right behind us is the Loaded Ladle. So Loaded Ladle started as one of our working groups, and it proves that our working group model works. When we have the resources to be able to assist these student groups, these student-focused, student-run groups, they can become sustainable and they can become something that changes those students' lives. And that's something that we want to be able to improve. And we also want to increase grant support for student and community groups. So we also give a lot of grants and funding to both students as well as community groups that impact student lives. So Avalon Sexual Assault Center, Red Bear Healing Home, Books Beyond Bars, Women's Wellness Within. These are just a few of the groups that we quite often assist with grants and support. They're groups that hire students, they're groups that train students, they're groups that have students involved in many different ways, including in supporting students and supporting their needs. We'd also like to expand programming such as Project Reconstruct, which is our alternative orientation series we run, and a new program we just launched, which is the TRC with TLC. So looking at truth and reconciliation and what that means. We had one event earlier this month, and already it's been picked up by several different universities. They really want to go run with this and look at what reconciliation means on campus. We want to be able to help that and support that. And things like last night, the student life debate, we heard like a lot of folks talking about orientation week and making orientation week more inclusive. Basically, one of the things we heard a lot of was making more space for marginalized groups, marginalized voices, and that's stuff that we do quite a bit already. We have a structure for that, and we want to be able to work with the DSU, and we're so excited to do that, to bring a lot of more alternative knowledges and different center different voices, different folks that aren't normally centered in the DSU. So we're really excited to do that. We hope that you vote yes to NSBERG, and yeah, thanks.
Thank you. So the order of candidates' opening statements has been determined at random. Jennifer, you are first.
Hi, everybody. Thank you all for coming out tonight. My name is Jennifer Sampson. I'm actually an environmental engineering student from Sexton campus, so I'm happy to be visiting your main campus tonight. I am in my third year. I have 1 year left, and I did a BSc in chemistry at St. FX before coming here. So I'm actually a little older than some of the other candidates, which may work to my disadvantage, actually. So outside of that, I do a lot of work with volunteering with conferences. I like to go out and try and make the world a better place if I can. I'm part of some environmental groups in Halifax, and I work at the Discovery Center as an innovation lab assistant, talking to kids about making things more innovative and engineering things and how important environmental sustainability is. So my three main topics are that I want all the amenities and services on all campuses at DAL to be all of the same quality, because as of right now, they're lacking in some other places and in some places on main campus as well. And I think that's really important, and that they're accessible to everybody who needs them, you know? So number two, I would like to implement an initiative that supports green or sustainable projects that are initiated by students, because as of right now, it's very hard to get funding to do such things here on campus, and I think that our school should invest in us if we're investing in its future. Yeah, and, oh, sorry, I shook the table. Number three is the co-op program that I know a lot of programs on campus actually benefit from or are involved in. Tends to lead to more frustration than it does success, and I'd like to see that amended so that students who are in the co-op programs actually get a chance to get that experience in the field that they want to be working in, because as of right now, so many people really don't benefit as much as they could from the program. So that's me.
Thank you. Katie, you are next.
Great, thanks so much. And also thank you so much to the students that are here and who are watching online. This is probably the most I've seen for a debate in the 4 years I've been here, so that's pretty incredible. I want to acknowledge personally, I'm a visitor from the West Coast, from Vancouver Island. I come from the Sauk Nation, and I'm a visitor here on Mi'kma'ki and Kjipuktuk, and I'm appreciative of that opportunity in all aspects of my life. So I'm in my 4th year of political science and sustainability at DAL. I've held numerous positions at all levels of governance throughout the union, as well as the university and in our communities. And I think I'm going to touch on a bit of that a little later on, but I think I'm just going to highlight a few of some themes and platform ideas that I'm going forward in this election with. So the first one that I wanted to touch on is governance, and an action item that I think can go a long way is unit reviews, and this is used a lot in faculties. This happens maybe once every 3 years, depending on which faculty you belong to. And this is an internal review with external members, and it really takes a critical look at what is being offered for students, if things need to be updated, if the policies are working. And I think something to a similar model can be applied to the union structure, and it can be a participatory project for students to be involved to see what the units of the union are actually doing for them. And a second kind of theme I'm going on is community and community engagement. And, oh, is that 1 minute?
That was 2 minutes.
All right, well, hopefully get to address a lot more of these in my specific questions towards the candidate.
Thank you. Next up, we have Isaac.
Hello, everyone. My name is Isaac Greenberg. I'm in my 4th year of an economics and sustainability double major. And I guess I'll just kind of tell the story of why I'm here. So I was inspired to run when I was trying to find the financial information for the union. I'm interested in kind of the accountability of where does all the money that our school, that our union, where is all that money that they receive? Somewhere between 1.4, 2.4. It's hard to find out exactly how much money it was, but trying to find out where that money comes from. And so as I dug deeper into what the union does and the activities, I found that there's really essentially two things that the union is meant to do. It's supposed to provide services for the members, so that'd be all of us, and it's supposed to advocate on our behalf. And as people in a research university, we would also know that it is really hard to get anything done, any decision-making done without numbers. And unfortunately, numbers or any kind of data at all. And an unfortunate turn of things, we don't actually have any data on what students want. So I realized that consultation, meaningful consultation, is necessary. And so that's what my main platform point is to consult. This is through a census made by the DSU. It would be run by a committee that would it would start with an actual consultation with different groups on campus, on all the campuses, different groups that would need to be especially consulted for the census. And then it would end with so we know which questions are actually important to ask. And then we would have a series of random selected samples, pretty much, that would be able to represent the community with data. The idea is that then you can create services with the Levied Society, so you can actually say, hey, this is what students actually want, and we're gonna help you get there. And then on the advocating side with the administration, we can actually look at the administration and go, hey guys, 75% of students want this, 50% of students want this. This is something that isn't working, or this is where our resources can go. I'm in economics.
All right, that was 2 minutes.
Okay, awesome, thanks a lot.
And last we have Aaron.
Wait, Ninda Lucy Aaron Prosper, Giziginama Sued, IH Neuroscience, Wildasi Dantil Bijdayo, Wildasi IH Dantiljik Suduyo. Every time I speak at an event, I try to open with my language being Mi'kmaq. And what I said is, thank you all for being here. I'm in neurosciences. I go to school here at Dal. And thank you all for taking the time to listen to us here at this debate. I guess a little bit about me. I started my journey through the creation of a D-Level society in my first year, which was the Medical Sciences Society, and then I moved on to be the Indigenous Students Rep on DSU Council, and currently I sit as the Indigenous Students Rep on Senate. And so I guess I'll talk about my platforms and why I want to run. My main platform point is building relationships with you and for you. And so the idea is, having a union that's stronger, that is able to build those relationships with students, to give them the services that they want, but also to advocate for them. So to build relationships with Board of Governors, to build relationships with Senate, with provincial governments, federal governments, so that your issues are being heard adequately. And one way I want to address that is another platform point is through what I'm calling the DSU's 100 Days of Listening. And so the idea is that if I became president, I would run this campaign. Oh, it like cut off a bit. Hello? Oh, it's spotty, sorry. Hello, hello, hello. 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 Test 1, 2. I can't hear. I'm half deaf. Oh, it's good? Okay, cool. I'll keep talking. 100 days listening. The idea is that at the end of the 100 days, to build a strategic direction for the union. So the issue currently with the union is that everything is short-term. The mandate of the union seems to change from year to year, and I will take more questions after that.
Thank you. Thank you to the candidates. So the first question will be asked to Katie, and Katie, you have 1 minute to answer. Why are you the most qualified for this position?
Yeah, thanks so much for the question. I think first off, I've held leadership and management roles in every level of governance within the union, at tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 societies, as well as community on and off campus initiatives. I have experienced bridging knowledge gaps, whether that's between individuals, groups, or institutions. And that applies, I think, in my daily life here at DAL. I'm confident in my communication and leadership approaches with team building as well as leading the direction of the team. I have a very intimate understanding of politics and political institutions, including both colonial and Indigenous systems. I've had both professional and personal experiences with those. I'm not afraid for standing up and advocating for students, and I think that's been shown in my 4 years here. And I am constantly at the table of almost every major decision that's happened at DAL, and I would really like to, and I try very hard to use every opportunity to empower students through those discussions.
That's 1 minute.
Thank you.
Jennifer, same question.
My qualifications really, they're a little outside of student government. So this experience would be a little different for me, but in my experience as a project manager of several projects throughout summer jobs and through groups on campus, engineering is a lot of project management. We're taught it, we're showed how to do it properly and how to take everybody's concepts into account, because really when you're working on a project, you're working as a group. So I've worked in several groups as both the lead and a member, and I think I understand pretty well how to try and find a compromise that suits everyone best. And my goal is always to make sure that everybody gets as much of what they want as humanly possible, because, well, in the end, we're all a community and we all need things. Whether or not we get them is the issue. So.
Thank you. Isaac, same question.
So the role of the president is a very general, multifaceted role. You have to be able to listen. You have to have a broad experience. You can empathize with all the people that are talking to you. You have to be a good listener so you can understand the situations that people go through and the experiences people have and what people want. My experience that helps with that is my broad experience. So all the things that I've studied, the experience I've had traveling, being an international student, but as well my positions I've had at Dow, being on DAS in my second year, but then also working with Orientation Week throughout my entire university career here, and being on the front line of seeing exactly what it is that students are feeling, especially in their first year. And in my mind, knowing exactly what first year students want, you can kind of figure out what students in all years are going to want. And that's where you actually find out what people want. You can actually communicate with students as much as possible. I think of all people here, or unless anyone else has been on O Week, probably have some of the most long, I guess, experiences directly with students.
That's 1 minute. All right, Aaron, same question.
Great. So my experience, again, like I mentioned in my intro, my journey started with building a D-level society. So I've come to understand almost every level of this university, from the basic, they're not basic, the departmental societies, all the way up to Senate and Board of Governors, and how the governance of the university intertwines with the union. But I also have experience outside of that, experience with student life. You may have seen me at a number of student events, opening events, building relationships with students. 1 year I was a head O-Week leader. But beyond that, my advocacy goes outside of DAL. I've worked with government. I do research. I research with Dr. Amy Bombay and Dr. Margot Latimer. And that research is directly with the government. So understanding how to impact students not only in this university, but outside this university.
Thank you. All right, we will move on to the next question. Jennifer, what is the greatest issue that the president is in charge of, and how do you plan to address it?
I think from my perspective of understanding is that the greatest issue that the president faces is to be an appropriate student representative for the whole student body. And where at DAL we do have so much diversity, that becomes a lot of interconnected parts that you really have to watch out for and make sure that you've really assessed what everybody needs. And by that, you have to reach out to them. Because in reality, as much as the president is one student rep for the whole society, or the whole community, sorry, we really need to consider whether we are the person who should be talking on an issue or if we should search out somebody who is more appropriate to deal with that. So I think that would be the best way to reach out with it, would be to keep in contact with the societies of different either marginalized groups or Indigenous groups, racialized groups, and make sure that they're getting the representative they want, not just that has been elected.
Thank you. Isaac, same question.
Can you just repeat the question first?
Of course.
Thank you.
What is the greatest issue that the president is in charge of, and how do you plan to address it?
Absolutely. Okay. So one of the largest issues that the president is in charge of is definitely figuring out the direction of the union, right? So one of the main jobs the president has is drafting policy and making those recommendations to the council. So one of the things that is great when you're making recommendations, I just know from my own experience, is again, having numbers to back things up. That's a big thing, is actually being able to say, we know this and this is how we know this. And again, I understand that there's plenty of other ways that we can do this, but for it to be both externally and internally valid, so that be in relation to the university and ourselves, that's going to be something that I will have to work on a lot if I get elected, would be figuring out what are the methodologies we'll use, how will we actually represent people with numbers. And this is something that other universities do and many other organizations do. So I think that'll be a good way to challenge that issue of representation and making policy based on that.
Thank you. Aaron, same question.
Okay, for me, it's being an adequate voice for the union. And so that's directly mandated through the bylaws for the president, is to be the main voice for this union. And so my idea is that, you know, we need a president that will be able to take in a diversity of opinion, to consider those, to foster diversity of discussion, so that at the end of the day, we come out with decisions within our policy, within our infrastructure, within all levels, our services, how we advocate to the Board of Governors, the Senate, how we advocate for student life, that best adequately represents students. And on every level, the president should have a voice, voicing that diversity of opinion. That's what I believe. And so keep it short and sweet.
Thank you. And Katie, same question.
Okay. So I agree with the three candidates, direction, representation of all students, and the voice of the union. All of those are incredibly important and are just the job. But I think the biggest challenge is balancing student interests as well as the perspectives and interests of the Dalhousie University as a whole. And this question often comes up, especially at the Board of Governors level, when you're told not to act like a student and as a board member. And that's hard when you're meant to be there to represent student voices, but as well act in the best interest of the university, whether that be financially or otherwise. And I think ways that I would address this very serious concern is through the Board of Governors, but also through informing students and giving them the resources and empowerment to do it for themselves, because a criticism of the union is that it's an insider's club. And so if we're able to empower other students to help us with the work.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to move on to the next question now. This is for Isaac to answer first. What is the biggest challenge that you personally will face holding this position?
Is that all right? Oh, yeah, there we go. Okay, yeah. So the biggest challenge, besides getting the mic on, will be definitely to, will definitely be actually understanding the framework of the union. Like, this is something that I would definitely admit, is that I'm new to this. I'm not I was never part of the student union as a very active member in the last couple of years. So kind of getting up to date on what's actually been happening will definitely be the biggest issue, and actually finding out what the members want. And so then that's also something that I have an action plan for how to figure out. And so yeah, that's probably the biggest challenge I'll have if I get elected.
Thank you. Aaron, same question.
I think the biggest challenge for this position moving forward, and given the current state of the union, is bringing the student body together to be stronger, bringing the student body together to agree on things, bringing the student body together so we can, adequately discuss things that we can all agree on. And when we don't disagree, or when we do disagree on issues, that we can have spaces and hold spaces where we can adequately have those disagreements, but in a respectful way. I think, as the president, I would definitely work to build that environment within our union. And right now, I don't think we have that. And so I want to build that environment so we can build on reconciliation and we can have reconciliation for all students, our Indigenous students, our racialized students, every single student within this union.
Thank you. Katie, same question.
Yeah, I think what Aaron just said was an incredibly an incredible challenge. But I think for me personally, I think it's being in charge of the team. And you're not only meant to be a support member of the union and for the staff and for the executive, but you're also meant to be their boss. And so I've worked a lot in societies, and I'm sure folks can attest to internal struggles and trying to mediate those while also trying to do good. Like, we don't want to jeopardize student services, the integrity of the union, or increase the amount of uncomfortableness that already exists. And this has been seen a lot with internal conflicts with executives, and I think it's going to take a strong but very considerate and aware leader to bring that and start at the executive level.
Thank you. And Jennifer, same question.
From my experience of not being on campus, I've noticed that there's quite a tension between the various campuses outside of the groups and societies that we have. And I think one of the bigger issues will be uniting us as a university that supports each other and does it on their own terms. Because forcing people to accept something and forcing people to be part of something isn't fair. So I think that the hardest part will be trying to find a way to unify the campuses and all of the people on them without making anyone feel uncomfortable and anyone feel marginalized or oppressed. I think it's very important that we consider this, though, because as a university, we should all get the same amount of support.
Thank you. All right, so next question. And this starts with Aaron. So how will you reach out to all members of the student union as president?
And so, like I said in my intro, through 100 days of listening, 100 days of straightforward outreach to students through meetings, through census, through research, data collection, meet with D-level societies, faculty societies, meet with levy societies, meet with students on all campuses, hold office hours on all campuses. Currently, we don't have that. That's how I would reach out, and I would build that strategic direction, and part of the strategic direction would be a strategic direction on how to outreach to students and how to adequately do that. So it's not only within those 100 days, but it's all 365 days of the office.
Thank you. Katie, same question.
Yeah, I think a lot of us agree that there needs to be a better job to reach more students across our campuses. And I think showing up and being personally engaged and having a meaningful relationship is an incredible first step that students don't often get to have with their executive of the union, let alone anyone else a part of the union. And I want to be able to branch out for sure. And this can start with formal societies or student organizations and move all the way down to individuals. And once those relationships have been established, it will be a lot easier to make contact and to have those meaningful consultations with folks across our campuses. This could look like attending general meetings more frequently. This could look like visiting our faculties and in establishing relationships with the faculties, with whether that's their deans, whether that's within their departments, because a lot of collaboration comes from those really meaningful relationships.
Thank you. Jennifer, same question.
Well, as I've stated, the campuses are quite divided. So I would want to reach out to the people on those campuses who are interested in being connected and being involved, and try to set out a monthly schedule where at least once a month, anybody who's got something they need to say to me has a chance because I show up. Because I come to their meeting or come to their fundraiser or come to their after hours event that their society is going to, whatever they prefer, obviously. And give them a chance to talk to me one-on-one, because I found personally, I never saw anybody from the executive committee down at Sexton campus. And I think honestly, being able to see somebody in person rather than emailing them gives me a better chance to talk to them and to tell them and express how I'm feeling. So I imagine that would go to the same for other people who are looking to reach out.
Thank you. And Isaac, same question.
So in my short time kind of being president with the union in the recent couple of years, I've definitely noticed that the executive has a huge portfolio, like a lot of work they have to do. So it's really not necessarily feasible just going from AGM to AGM necessarily. So the way that I would reach out is definitely through, again, having consultations at the beginning of the year, even from like where we have the B00s of students who've just enrolled. So understanding even what people coming into their first year want. Like the entire experience has to be what students want. That's what we're here to do. My experience doing this is the consultations that I've already done for the government and for the school, the government mostly. But yeah, so those kinds of things have helped me figure out how exactly I'm going to how to actually consult and then take that information and create a census that can actually represent students on campus. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we will move on to the next question. And this will start with Katie. So how will you deal with those who are opposed to DSU policies or statements while holding president?
Yeah, we're definitely opposed all the time, whether that's from faculty members, administrators, staff members, our own executives, students. And that opposition is incredibly important to recognize because it's incredibly important to recognize, not only because it's important to hear the voices, but it's because there's no space, like Aaron mentioned earlier, that already exists to host a lot of these opposition or like type of conversations that could get uncomfortable. And I believe one way that I could solve that is trying to incorporate mechanisms within the union governance to provide support for diversity of an opinion and of our unique experiences to ensure student voices are heard before the decisions are made. And I think that's a big criticism that we need to listen to and change.
Thank you. Jennifer, same question.
Excellent. I actually think Katie is like spot on with this. This is a great idea. When they make decisions about policies in various levels of government, they do look for public involvement. When they do environmental impact assessment, they are also supposed to look for public involvement. So that would definitely be a key thing to look for when someone is opposing you. Generally, they're not doing it to be stubborn. They have a reason why. And it's important that we ask ourselves, are we considering their reason why? Do they have something better in mind? Is there something better that we can do, something that we can revise? And I think, honestly, having some sort of internal review whenever there's a serious issue that comes up to estimate whether or not we could be doing it better. So, yeah.
Thank you. Isaac, same question.
Can you just repeat the question one more time?
Of course. How will you deal with those that are opposed to the DSU policies or statements while holding your position as president?
Okay. So yeah, listening is key. So listening and compassion, really understanding where people are coming from, pretty much what they've said, but definitely understanding that there are limits to what is acceptable to provide a platform for. So that's obviously something that we've seen, and we definitely need to acknowledge that there are issues that can be had in closed doors. Even from the beginning of this campaign, we've seen that happen, where having public conversations about certain things, it's a good idea to learn how to educate on a one-on-one level, right? So personally, if I see, if I'm in that situation, That's something that I will personally one-on-one deal with. If it's a situation that one-on-one conversation or confrontation can't handle, then that's where you move on to other situations. So in my training of Deep Democracy, which is a conflict resolution tool, that's something that you deal a lot with. So I would definitely be equipped to deal with those kinds of confrontations.
Thank you. And Aaron, same question.
Great. I agree with all of them in the sense of, we need to listen to students more, but why can't we just mandate it? Why can't we mandate it within the union that the president must be held accountable to the policies that he or she passes? And so how I would plan to do that, to hold the accountability, is if I, as president, were to bring forward a policy, I would host a policies committee so that any student within this union who opposes that can come to this committee and have their voices heard. And I would do this in advance of bringing it to council to have these changes. Because right now, current policies go to the union council maybe a week before. A week before passing really significant issues is not adequate time for students to discuss this. So having a way that students feel that their opinions are heard.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to the next question. So this will be for Jennifer to start. So what is the biggest impact you want to make while being president?
I think for me, the biggest impact that I'm looking to make is to make sure that all campuses have the same amenities and service. And I've said it before, but it's such a crucial part of being here as a student and for everyday life. Like, we're here for at least 4 years, maybe 2, maybe 6, depending on your program. This is our life and it should fit us. And right now it doesn't. And right now it doesn't support us either. So that's my biggest concern.
All right, thank you. Isaac, same question.
Something that I want to really implement and impact Dalhousie with is, again, having some kind of way to represent people in a way that is meaningful, both inside the union and outside. So that would look like the census, and having that something that can be implemented year after year, so that the person who comes in their first year to the moment they leave and they graduate will feel that they've represented. Doesn't necessarily mean that they'll be happy with the decisions that ESU makes. We make a lot of decisions and people will always be somewhat unhappy with those. But if they feel represented, that's democracy. And that's really what I want to see democracy at the union working. Thank you.
Thank you. Aaron, same question.
Okay, so the biggest impact I want to make is that through my, if I were to be elected, is to create a space and to create a community here at Dal that is envied by the rest of the country. That's the impact I want to make. I go to research conferences. I say to people, I'm from Dal. I want to be proud that I'm from Dal. But people say, oh, that must suck. That's too bad. Well, no, there's so many great people, there's so many great students in this community, and I want to be a president that gives you that recognition, not just within this university, but to give you that recognition outside this university so that it's envied not only within Nova Scotia, but it's envied outside, it's envied externally, and people want to come to Dal because it's a great community, people are smart, have it envied.
Thank you. And Katie, same question.
Yeah, I think the biggest impact that I could make on this campus, honestly, I think comes back to the environment that the union and I can create in this position. And there's been a lot of foundational work that has been laid by past executives and union members. But I would really like students to know and to know about the union and to use the union, because that's something that students don't feel a connection to. But the biggest impact, I think, is around safety. And so safety of the person, safety of our thoughts, safety of our expression, our cultures, and safety of our sexualities, safety of our genders. Like, this is a type of culture that we talk about, but hasn't been established. So I'd love to make that type of shift on our campus.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to the next question. And we'll start with Isaac. If you could name one thing currently being done as in the role of president that is currently positive, what would it be?
Definitely. I have to say, one thing that inspires me and gives me a lot of, I guess you would say, I don't want to say pride, but definitely a lot of, yeah, I'd say pride. I'll definitely say pride. Proud to be a Tiger and proud to be a Dallas student is I would say social justice on campus. That's something that social and environmental justice on campus have been something that, while controversial, have also been effective. So I definitely would agree with that. Things like Divest Dow, things like the racial justice, the justice symposium that just happened. Those kinds of things are actually really impactful, and they have been helping people here. So that's something that I am seeing as a positive thing the DSU is doing right now.
Thank you. Aaron, same question.
I would agree with a lot of what Isaac said. In working with the president through my role of Senate, and one of the things I helped create with her in partnership with the Vice Provost Student Affairs is the Diversity and Inclusion team that's going out and doing systematic outreach to students to look at issues of diversity and inclusion. I partnered and she partnered with the Vice Provost to do that. That's definitely a positive, all the advocacy on this end, and I think more of that can be done.
Thank you. Katie, same question.
I think I'd like to bring it back to a really incredible initiative that our current president initiated this year, and it's called Text to Pres. And it's such a simple concept, yet so effective. Hundreds of students have reached out through this very accessible way of communicating with the president to either talk about their personal issues, because up until recently, the executive were the people that folks would confide in about sexual assault, for instance, and until we got the Survivor Support Center. And so being able to break down a lot of the communication barriers, whether physical or not, between the president and the rest of the students, I think is incredibly important. And I'd love to continue those types of initiatives that include any type of student and have that direct access to the president.
Thank you. And Jennifer, same question.
Can you read the question again for me?
Of course. If you can name one thing currently being done in the presidential role that is positive, what would it be?
Oh, okay. Well, I spoke with the current president before everything began because I wanted to really understand what she's been doing and what kind of daily life she experiences. And I must say, I am so impressed with the way that she's really advocated for so many different societies here on campus and how she's really supported them. Like, for example, the emergency hijab kit that got instituted this year. That's a phenomenal thing. And I'm blown away by the amount of public and community involvement that has happened from the presidential seat this year.
Thank you. All right, we will move on to the next question, and this will be the last question that I have written. Aaron, if you can name one thing that is currently being done in the presidential role that may need a bit of improvement, what would that be?
I think, to me, it would be, it's a tough one, putting me on the spot. Increase transparency, increase outreach and consultation with groups. Currently, I can say within the Board of Governors, recommendations were made on behalf of Indigenous students, and Indigenous students were not consulted on those issues. And I am part of the Indigenous Students Collective, and I know there's other Indigenous student societies that have taken issue with this, that these recommendations are made, and maybe they don't always align with what we want. And the realization that, yes, we are diverse and there's diverse groups, but also within those groups, there's a diversity within those groups as well. And recognizing that diversity of opinion within those groups too.
Thank you. Katie, same question.
So it's just like a negative aspect of the.
What's one aspect about being president that can be improved on?
Oh, Great. So I think specifically, I want to talk to the administrative work of the president position and the amount of meetings, the amount of just spaces taken away from doing their student advocacy work or going to student events because of a lot of this administrative work. And so looking into creating student jobs, like there are commissioners for each executive position, but I'd really like to look at how we can divide that up into being more effective work and to give students an opportunity, again, to open up the union, to participate in the structure and the decisions being made, as well as just learning how to deal with different administrative duties. And I think working together with more students will be able to give the president more time to dedicate to student-specific issues.
Thank you. Jennifer, same question.
As I said before, I'm incredibly impressed with our current president. I think that availability and reaching out are definitely issues that could be addressed, and your idea of delegation is fantastic, by the way. I'm super impressed by that too. I think that a lot of the bureaucracy that surrounds it really limits the ability to be as involved as you need to be. But outside of that, it would definitely be the reaching out to other campuses and to our distance students, because we do have students who do a lot of courses online who probably don't feel like they're part of the DAL community, and they really should. So.
Thank you. And Isaac, same question.
Sure. So while I agree that making more commissioner positions or more commissioners' positions or expanding those commissioner positions is a good idea, I also think it's about time that we also follow best practices around the world with some of the best student associations and unions in the world. One example would be Cardiff University in Cardiff. The way that the executive works there is that it's treated like a full-time job. Ours is also a full-time job, but there it's actually treated like one, where you don't have to take a class. You are actually given a leave of absence, where you can either, if you're in your third year or whatever, you actually take that year off school and you commit yourself to working for the union. That's an issue that this is something that wouldn't just affect the president, it would affect the entire executive. Another thing is accountability. Right now, it's easy to say right now what we're going to do, but once we get into the school year, it's a really hard task to actually find out what were the deliverables that each executive, and in this case, the president, put out. And that's something that's really hard to find right now. Only a couple candidates, I would definitely say Musuma has done a good job of actually saying these are her deliverables, this is what she's done. But that's something that I think could also be expanded on a lot.
All right, so that was the end of the questions that I specifically wrote. So now we are going to questions that students have written in.
Do you have the time?
Yes, the time is 6:05.
Okay.
So
Are we taking a break?
we will be taking a break within the next 15 minutes.
Okay.
So, Katie, why are you running for this position?
It's a really good question, and I think it always brings it back to a great opportunity to talk about how my learning experience in my 4 years of DAL have kind of influenced what type of direction I want to take with my own life. And running for president was not a second thought. It has been on my mind for a very long time, and running for this position is important to me because I also remember in my first year, whether it's in my class or within the union, seeing the representation and having someone to look up to or to affirm their experiences and to say, hey, I could do that. And really realizing that the barriers that some of us face may not actually exist. And if we're able to be confident and have someone to look to, that's what I would appreciate. And I think that's a lot of the reason why I'm running.
Thank you. Jennifer, same question.
My decision to run for president was based off the fact that going to campus going to school at Sexton campus, I did not feel part of the Dalhousie community at all. And I was so surprised last year when I got here, because of the way engineering works, that there really wasn't any news from main campus. Like, we didn't even know when the elections were happening last year, because it's so hard to reach out if you don't know there's something to reach out for. And I was really sad about that. And I thought that maybe I could make a difference in that way. And that's it. I've had enough student experience over the last 6 years of schooling that it was important to me. And I thought that it would help future coming students. So that's it.
Thank you. Isaac, same question.
Absolutely. So as I already said earlier, was inspired to run because I could not find the budget. It was simple as that. I could find the budget, but I couldn't find something that I could actually read from this year. And so when I went to it, I figured there's something seriously wrong. That's something that is like legally mandated, is really hard to read and understand by the union. And so that was like, it was like the tip of the iceberg. And then once I kept going, I realized there's a lot that has to be done. There's a lot of great things. There's a lot of things that need to be improved. And I saw that was an opportunity for my background, my experience, my skill set to be able to tackle those challenges. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you. And Aaron, same question.
Okay. For me, it was, this has been on my mind for a while. I do a lot of advocacy work for my constituency, being Indigenous students, and really feeling, how can I expand that to other students as well within this university? And the other side of it is listening to students in the weeks leading up to nominations. I spoke with a lot of students that I knew and said, what are your thoughts and should I run? And a lot of people said yes. And the other thing, this is a historic DSU elections. And so to be able to be a part of that, to be a part of the discussions here, is probably one of the biggest we've ever had, and just wanting to be a part of that, to be a part of the conversation. And my promise, my advocacy, has started before this, and elected or not, it will continue after this.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to the next question. Jennifer, this first one's for you. As president, you sit on the two highest governing bodies at the university. What committees of Senate and the Board of Governors would you be interested in sitting on, and why?
That is an excellent question. I'm going to be really honest, I don't know what all of the committees are, but I would like to sit on as many social justice and environmentally sustainable committees as I can, or at least have some sort of representation there so that they know that they're being listened to and being heard and that it's being taken into consideration. And outside of those, which I obviously have a personal interest in, anything that needs to be addressed definitely should be part of my schedule. So that's that.
Thank you. Isaac, same question.
In very much the same vein, I don't know the exact names, though I would say the Budget Advisory Committee, I feel like is something that would be a Board of Governors thing that I would like to be on, at least. So they are the ones who kind of figure out where our money, where the administration's money goes and that sort of thing. So that's something that I'd be interested in, absolutely, was figuring out where that goes and being able to represent student interests and that sort of thing.
Thank you.
That's good.
Aaron, same question.
Great. Personally, I would like to sit on every possible Board of Governors and Senate committee that is mandated and I'm able to sit on. I would also like to build a caucus for the Board of Governors, build a caucus so that they can meet and be open and transparent to students. So students can come and ask questions of their Board of Governors representatives, of their Senate representatives, so that they can bring these issues forward. And also, I will advocate for those committees that we're not allowed to sit on. There's a committee within the Senate, the research committee, that students are not allowed to sit on that committee. I would actually physically go and motion within the Senate to address this issue so we can have seats where we don't have them currently. And building caucuses, if I don't sit on it, making sure there's a diversity of opinion of your representatives on these committees.
Thank you. Katie, same question.
Yeah, a board caucus actually already exists. We made that this year, so that's pretty incredible. So I'm great folks thought about that, but it already exists. The BAC, so the Budget Advisory Committee actually is general students, so that opportunity is super great to keep for them. And I've sat on the Community affairs and academic affairs, those are two committees I've sat on in the past 2 years simultaneously. And then there's the infrastructure and renewal committee that Jeremy sits on. And then the committee that folks are referring to that there is no student seat is the Finance, Audit, and Investment Committee, and that's completely external. However, that's the argument that to keep students off of it, and the assumption is that students can attend. Oh, sorry, I ran out of time for Senate. Senate has specific mandated committees that the president sits on, and I'd really like to create the opportunities for our community seats and other senators to be a part of those committees as well.
Thank you.
Sorry.
All right, so next question. So Isaac, you're first with this one. Please describe all experiences with the DSU and its executives that you have had within the past year, highlighting your ability to work in a team environment.
Sure. Okay, starting in September. Being a head O-Week leader was an incredible privilege, and I was working with the VPSL and the I think just the O-Week committee coordinator. So that was really exciting. That was a great opportunity to figure out what student life can be like on campus, figuring out kind of the issues that they go through, seeing Corey running around, getting things done, organizing things. That was really exciting. So it was also interesting to see the rest of what the executive was doing during that time. Since then, I actually haven't really been incredibly involved. As I said earlier, it's been something that I've been I've always been kind of on the student level. It's never been my intention up until maybe a couple months that I actually was like, I want to run for an executive position. So that's kind of my big hurdle, is getting over that and seeing exactly what to do.
Thank you. Aaron, same question.
So like I mentioned in my intro, I started my advocacy through the creation of D-Level Society, Medical Sciences Society. Also was a part of the Dalhousie Science Society. I chaired their Environmental Affairs Committee in my second year. Also my second year became a counselor on the DSU Council, and actually in my third year as a DSU counselor was voted top DSU counselor in the Impact Awards. In this year, I am a senator on the Dalhousie Senate. Beyond that, I've done research here at this university. I've worked collaboratively with the administration through my positions. I'm the coordinator of the Equity and Accessibility Office for the union. And I guess to give an example of how I can work collaboratively, I ran a campaign to have the Mi'kmaq flag permanently installed within this university on all campuses, and I worked collaboratively with the administration to make that happen.
Thank you.
Could you repeat the question?
Yes, of course. Please describe all experiences with the DSU and its executives that you have had within the past year, highlighting your ability to work in a team environment.
Yeah, so specifically in the past year, I've sat as the Board of Governors rep, and that's a 2-year position, so I'm just finishing my second term, and it requires the board member to be a DSU counselor as well, so I've been a part of council this year and the past year before that. And through this position, I've had the opportunity to facilitate as well as be a participant in a lot of workshops and consultations with students. And you know, working through and learning with students has been a big part of that. And I think that's kind of is involved with being a part of the team while also being able to be a team leader. And that requires a lot of active listening and, running out of time. But I want to speak specifically later on to how these.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, Jennifer, same question.
Well, my experience with the DSU has been very limited. I am definitely beat by Aaron and Katie here. I applaud your involvement, by the way. What I have been involved in the last year have been student-led groups. So the DAL Environmental, Chemical, and Civil Conference that we held in February was completely student-organized and student-arranged. I was part of the promotions and sponsorship sections. And really, it was a huge team effort to make it as successful as it was. Right now, I'm working on a Women in Mining conference, as well as I've been part of the Women in Engineering. I try to involve myself in the community around me as much as possible, and I would like to expand my community in this way. But as far as DSU executives, very limited experience other than talking to them like one-on-one. Like I've talked to our president and some other executives just about their positions. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, we will move on to this next question. This one will have a discussion and will be the last question before our next break. So we'll start with Isaac. What does equity mean to you, and how do you plan on implementing equitable measures for all?
Okay, awesome. So equity means treating different people differently. That's a pretty straight up way to say it. That's the way just in economics we say it. And it is a fair way. So defining what is different and what is different treatment, and it's to get an equal outcome. That again doesn't mean like equal opportunity. Equal outcome doesn't mean like communism. It just means like making sure that given the same amount of effort, people are kind of getting more or less the same outcome. And how to actually implement that. The way that I think things through is very analytical. And so again, having information about what services are working for people and making sure people are represented. If people want a certain kind of service or want something that isn't there, or we understand that there's a certain hunger for something that isn't being expressed to the university, we will have the information to back that up. Actually, you know what? That's probably a good way to end that off. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Aaron, same question.
So I'll speak on this from my Indigenous perspective. So equity to me as an Indigenous person is creating the space for me to be Indigenous. Not the expectation of people to be Indigenous, but creating the space so that I personally can be Indigenous, but also the other person on the other side of the table can be whoever they are, and creating that space. And then also creating a space that everyone within that space is equal. They have an equal opinion, equal opportunity on any issue. How I plan to address that, I will campaign for issues policies, and so through my platform of DSU's 100 Days of Listening, what are the equity issues, and through that building a strategic plan and putting in place policies that these are addressed long term. That is my plan.
Thank you. Katie, same question.
Is it just what does equity mean to me?
What does equity mean to you, and how do you plan on implementing equitable measures for all?
Yeah, so equity means to me, equity plays in my daily life. Equity, I really don't believe should be political. Often it is, and often it's co-opted by political ideologies, which is not true. Equity to me means empowering others. Equity means actively including others. Equity means going beyond policy. Equity means also recognizing that things are intersectional and that there isn't just one solution. It is not linear. Equity has so many facets, and it's really principle and values based when you come back to it. There's no step-to-step process to trying to pursue equity and to make folks feel like they belong. It's a group effort, and to provide equity on campus, it's very much starting there, just starting to understand what equity is and what it means to folks.
Thank you. Jennifer, same question.
Wow, how do you follow that? So I totally agree with Katie on most of the points that she made. But for me, equity is often mistaken for equality, and that's not this. It's not the reality. The reality is that people start at different points and that they should have the chance to reach the same end no matter where that point that they start is at. And they should have whatever support they deem is adequate. Not something that we can mandate or we can tell them what they need. We need to ask them from their perspective, what do they need? And we need to make it available. So I would like to see the infrastructure of the administration reviewed for its equitable policies, because while we may see them equitable, other people may not see that the same way. And we need to take that into consideration.
Thank you. So candidates, you will have 5 minutes to discuss. Each candidate will get at least 45 seconds of uninterrupted speaking before I will cut you off. Anybody may begin.
On the same question?
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think opening up the dialogue and something that's happening on campus is a lot of uncomfortableness around when we start opening up dialogues about what equity looks like. And a perfect example of this is the criticism of equity hiring policies. And recently the university has addressed this and come out and said it's a target form of our strategic direction within the university. And we've been working so hard towards those types of policies and bridging those gaps and mending those gaps that are clearly about representation and folks seeing themselves in their university.
I think expanding on that, we need. Yes, there has been, backlash to the university and criticism, but really educating what this means. So the university did not just make this decision on a whim. The decision was made through paperwork, through research, through them having to show the government that they were not able to make their administration more diverse through other means. And so this is a different means that they are trying to create that. Improving equity, just having the conversation, meeting students where they're at, understanding that no matter where you come from, what race you are, you have equity issues. Every individual has some form of equity issue. And I would like to have an open forum to have those discussions.
Just to add on to the equity hiring policy, I think this also could have been a great learning opportunity for other people who did not quite understand what was happening and why that was acceptable to do that. I think from now on, I think even if the administration does something like this again, they should also release an explanation of why they're doing this and how that works. I think that would be a good thing to work on with the administration as well.
For me, when I heard about the equitable hiring policy event that occurred, I found myself being really happy about it. I was like, hey, that's great. And when I realized that there was quite a bit of backlash, I was surprised that people weren't looking at the bigger picture. The bigger picture is that we're all here and we all need to be taken into account, and sometimes we don't need to be in the spotlight. Sometimes it's somebody else's turn. So
Yeah, and I think just wow, like I'm incredibly appreciative of the discussion that's happening here, because also what Aaron was saying about meeting students where they're at, that's like a really big part of even starting an equitable process, because as mentioned, our journeys have started differently and we're also becoming adults. And so this is an incredible time to have these learning opportunities to ensure that students are getting a full and well-rounded type of experience at Dal. And this is a concern that goes beyond student life, and it goes into our academics as well. And I think being able to bring the conversation to students and offer more opportunities to talk will hopefully lead us to more of a comfortable environment to have these really difficult and heavy conversations.
I think what I want to expand on is, students need to work together to dismantle the fringes of political debates. As Katie said, equity issues are not often political, but they get lauded into right-wing, left-wing, or right or left. And, I talk to people on the right. Yes, they want equity issues to be looked at. I talk to people on the left. They want equity issues to be looked at and talked about. And the individuals on the fringes that are detrimental to this discussion and detrimental to us actually achieving equity for all students. And so we need to create an environment on this campus so we can have these discussions no matter what your opinion is, and that it's an equitable discussion.
25 seconds left.
For me.
Yeah, I think for the equitable discussion and how I personally would go forward with trying to create those environments, Honestly, I've been racking my brain this entire year trying to figure out the best way to do it, and I think it's honestly bringing it back to the students and getting us all in one place, but even that is a feat. So having more of discussions what folks want to see.
Thank you. All right, that was an excellent discussion. We will be taking a short break. If you have any questions, go see Kat. She's at the front of the room, and we will get them on the Google Doc. We will be back shortly.
before I came because I know it's gonna be 3 hours.
All right, welcome back to the debate. Before we get underway, I just want to reiterate, if you have any questions, you can come see Kat at the front. She will be able to take questions. If you have any concerns about the debate, we have our CRO here, Caitlin Lowe. She's at the back of the room. You can either email her or go see her in person. And just for all the candidates, just a quick reminder, when the hand goes up, that means there's 10 seconds left. And when I start counting down, that means that it ends. And then I will say that your time is finished. Now, I would like to welcome to the stage Mary McDonald. She is the 5th candidate that will be here for the debate, and she has 2 minutes for opening statements.
Thank you very much. I'm Mary, and I apologize for being late this evening. The timing conflicted with a mandatory class that I had to attend. Thank you very much for attending this debate. I'd just like to share a little bit of details about myself and my experience. I first came to Dalhousie in 1993 after I graduated from Mount St. Vincent, and I took an intensive program in international development studies, and I completed an honors thesis on US-Cuba relations. And while I was taking that program, my son and I, we traveled to Cuba twice. One of the trips was on a class trip, and while I was in Cuba, I had the opportunity to meet Cubans who worked at the local disability organization in Havana, and they've since become lifelong friends, and I'm still in contact with them. And upon completing my program in 2000, I took a couple of years off. I did some research, and I came back to Dalhousie in 2006. And I started taking graduate level business classes. And so I continued with that. And I focused mainly on corporate social responsibility and on stakeholder relations. So I'm very interested in stakeholder relations, and I'd like to apply that to my role should I be elected as president of the DSU. I think it would be very helpful and appropriate to apply stakeholder relations to some of the organizations that the DSU is involved with and community groups.
Thank you very much, Mary.
Sorry. Okay, thank you.
So we're going to move on to questions, and because Mary has just arrived, we'll give her the chance to answer a question first. So, Mary, and just a reminder, it's a minute to answer the question. This year, marginalized students felt they had a space in the DSU, saw themselves represented in the DSU executive, and had programming and events directed at their specific needs. A lot of other students do not understand the importance of these services for marginalized students and substantive equality put into practice. How will you ensure that the greater Dalhousie population is educated on what it means to work with an anti-oppressive framework through policy and practice to ensure that equity for marginalized students is achieved on campus?
Well, quite frankly, I think that some marginalized students have been neglected. For example, I can speak from the lived experience of being a person with a disability, and the DSU, during my time that I've been a student here, I feel that the DSU has neglected issues affecting students with disabilities. So while it is commendable that marginalized students have been elected to the DSU, I want to take a holistic approach because many other students feel that their concerns, their views have been completely ignored. So we need to find a way to integrate everyone's concerns, because this is a student union that speaks on behalf of almost 19,000 students.
Thank you. Katie, same question.
Yeah, and I think this question addresses a lot of why our campus is quite uncomfortable right now, is because this is the first time in history within our union we are having these conversations, and also this is the first time they've been led by the folks a part of those communities. And so it's reasonable to say that it's okay to feel uncomfortable, it's okay to not know, because this entire experience is, like Mary said, it's a holistic collaboration between not just one group, and it's an intersectional and holistic approach that I think will hopefully introduce a lot of more educational and learning experiences for folks that feel like their voices aren't heard. And I think just the last thing I want to point out is that all folks have a role, whether you belong to a marginalized group or not. All folks have a role to play in the conversation, but it's just the voice of that group just may not always be at the center. And I think it's learning how to take turns to share empowerment.
Thank you. Jennifer, same question.
I think part of the issue with making sure that people are aware and educated about what people are lacking in and what their needs and services are is that they don't hear about it from the people who need it themselves. And I think that giving people a platform to represent themselves and their communities and their societies where everybody is open and listening may be a really good first start, but it's going to be a long process to reach a point where we don't need to explain ourselves anymore and everyone just kind of accepts what everyone else needs. So to work towards that, maybe we could institute a community involvement initiative where people from different cultures come and share their culture so that people understand and respect it from the part of an observer and not a participant. So.
Thank you. Isaac, same question.
Yeah, I have to say I definitely agree with a lot of the candidates here about how it is commendable that lots of marginalized students do feel represented on the DSU exec especially, but also just in council in general. And to build onto that, I think that we also do need to use, again, hard data. I know I'm starting to sound like a broken record here, but not having any information, any hard information on what students want is unacceptable. Plain and simple. Using that information to actually educate students about what equity looks like and what certain marginalized groups do actually want, saying, hey, this service is here because 90% of this, this student body wants this. That is a lot more powerful than just saying students want this. And again, we see that all the time. So I think that's something that we definitely need to address and understand and then work forward with that.
Thank you.
Would you
And
repeat the question?
of course. How will you ensure that the greater Dalhousie population is educated on what it means to work within an anti-oppressive framework through policy and practice to ensure that equity for marginalized students is achieved on campus?
Okay. The first thing I do, so I worked as the Equity and Accessibility Office, and I would want to increase the capacity for that, being transparent and open. I was hired in late October. That is not adequate time for the Equity and Accessibility Office to actually physically outreach, because by time October comes, you're already hitting the ground running. Things are already going on. And so really building the infrastructure early on within our union, have hiring within the summer, have hiring maybe in May, have these things established, have a plan established on how we outreach and educate students. And again, like I said, through my DSU's 100 Days of Listening, that would be a component, reaching out to students with disabilities, marginalized students on every spectrum to address these issues. And so that's how I would address it.
Thank you. So candidates, you have 5 minutes to discuss. Anybody can begin. You can only speak for a maximum 45 seconds uninterrupted before I will cut you off. And you may begin.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to note that as much as data is incredibly important to rely on, it should not be the only thing to rely on. Students are not numbers, and students are not just data. And when we're talking about issues of equity and we're talking about interests of marginalized groups that often feel like their voices aren't heard, it's more than just that. I think that is required to be a part of the conversation. It's incredibly important for empirical evidence, but as we're finding out, not everything has empirical evidence, and it's learning how to accept and understand lived experiences of folks and then try to incorporate that as well as empirical evidence.
Yeah, I definitely understand that. And I definitely agree with you in the sense that we are not all numbers. That's true, and I definitely feel that way when I go to, mental health counseling or something and feel like a number. But at the same time, we do need to have those numbers to make those decisions. We can't just say that we can't just bring that information, not having any information to bring to people to say this is what people want. I mean, it's all fine and well to say that we also just need to talk to people, but I love to understand like exactly how that will translate into action rather than just what we've been doing all this time, which some of it's worked and some of it hasn't. So I'd love to see what that looks like.
I think that data can take many forms. It's not just numbers. Data can be qualitative. Data can be empirical and empirical is empirical. It can take many forms. And so if I were elected president again, like Isaac said, sounding like a broken record, but through this campaign, through DSU's 100 Days of Listening, it's systematic outreach, getting to that qualitative, not just getting numbers. And also things we can do is, students can hold us accountable. We can actually go to the university and make motions to ensure that equity is and accessibility is addressed not only in this building, but outside this building.
Sorry. I actually don't know. Sorry, you go first.
If you want to go first, it's more than 5.
No, you haven't spoken yet.
Okay. So I think that all of the points that have been made are very important, and I think it's about finding a balance between the scientific background to push forward a movement, as well as having the public support and the actual public understanding of what that movement needs to be. And maybe that could be something that's incorporated into an infrastructure that supports NSPIRG, for example, or some other sort of research that gives it the opportunity for students to work for themselves and to reach out to other students instead of it just being whether or not we can find the numbers or whether or not we can manage to get everywhere all at once.
Yeah, and I think something to bring back to the conversation, if we're going to conduct research of students on campus, it's also who does that data belong to, and if students will be able to access it freely, or if they're if they're going to be culturally appropriately and sensitively represented in that data. Because also we understand that there isn't just one way of knowing, and breaking down those barriers between knowledges and what we accept as true and what we accept as valid is an extremely important conversation when we're addressing what students need. And so yes, collecting data is incredibly important, but we also need to see what other aspects that this process is already creating barriers to students that don't necessarily are reflected or any of.
Thank you.
Moderator, does each person have the opportunity to speak?
Yes.
Okay, because it seems like one person's dominating the conversation, and each person should have an equal opportunity to speak.
Every candidate gets 45 seconds of uninterrupted speaking. Once 45 seconds are reached, another candidate is free to jump in.
Mary, would you like to have time to speak?
Yes, I wanted to speak to my own personal experience as a person living with a disability, and I've been here on campus for many years, and consistently I have found that the DSU has utterly failed to consider the needs and interests of students with disabilities. I'm not here to bash the DSU, but there is a credibility gap that is apparent. when we're talking about marginalized groups, and I could name any number of instances where the DSU has failed to address the concerns and the needs of students with disabilities on campus. The Tiger Patrol is one example. Another example is this very unfortunate renovation that took place with this this facility with the Greywood and the installation of this miserable little box of an elevator when at one time for many
Thank
years
you, Mary.
it was served by a perfectly accessible ramp.
Thank you, Mary. So we're going to move on to the next question. That was a great discussion. And so the first person to get this question will be Katie. So Katie, recent incidents of anti-Black racism in the sub are extremely harmful and just one example of how anti-Blackness manifests in the lives of Black students. How do you plan to tackle racism on campus in your role as president?
Yeah, just to reference the Backhouse report, and this came out a couple years ago, but is still so relevant on campus. With the Backhouse report, they say that racism on Dalhousie campus is a ticking bomb. Anti-Black racism exists all over our campuses within people not intending to do so, but still makes that really, really negative impact on the everyday lives of our students who identify as Black, whether they're, and also recognizing that there are unique experiences of folks that have that background, whether they're international students, whether they're domestic students, whether they have their heritage in Nova Scotia, realizing that all of this is so intersectional and does not have a single answer, and to ensure that we are supporting the students that are going through safety concerns on campus.
Thank you. Jennifer, same question.
I was incredibly disappointed to hear about the anti-Black racism because I can't understand somebody being that hateful about somebody due to their race, but I think the key important part here is to not put emphasis on the people who put it on our campus and who deface that, but to put emphasis on the victims of that and to give them support. To work towards in the future, to give them a better platform to express their own cultures, their own individualities, and to support an accepting space. Because if the authority of the DSU or the Board of Governors does not support it and doesn't show up and doesn't prove that these people are wrong, then where are they going to see it? Right. It should start with us, and we should start with supporting these people who have been so dehumanized. That's not fair, and that's not right.
Thank you. Isaac, same question.
Absolutely. I think anyone would know, but this is just another explicit situation where we know that anti-Black racism is real on campus. It is happening here. And we need to find a way to deal with survivors of anti-Black racism. We need to be able to understand how we can, how the DSU can help. But we also need to understand that it is also the, how do you say it? It's the moderate white people, I would say, is also an issue. That we have become complacent. We are not actually taking our responsibility, using our privilege to listen and act. We are actually, and this is, a classic, but it's true, and it doesn't mean it's any less true, that is now, again, another time that we know that this is actually something we need to act on. And yeah, I think that's just, that's what I'll.
Thank you. Aaron, same question.
So I would agree with all of them that, the situations that happen in this building are very sad, very unfortunate. But it not only exists here in this university, it exists within Nova Scotia. Just today, in Member 2 First Nation, there was a school bus that was vandalized with anti-Indigenous graffiti. So there are school children going and seeing this and seeing anti-Indigenous graffiti, anti-Black graffiti. How I would address this is, building partnerships with people like Dallas Security, with DMCRT, to make sure that every space that we hold is equitable. And if students say, DMCRT or Dallas Security doesn't, it's not the right fit, well, I will speak to students and look on how to do that. Also, I will look to implement policies so that beyond my mandate, long-term, students have mechanisms to address these issues.
Thank you. Mary, same question.
Yes, I'd like to unequivocally condemn this type of racist behavior. There should be zero tolerance for this, both within the student union and the wider university community. Anyone caught engaging in such behaviors should be expelled from the university immediately. It's difficult to know what the solutions are to this type of behavior. And also, I want to mention also hateful videos that are showing up on YouTube. I condemn that as well. And I think it's important that especially non-marginalized people on campus have to vocally condemn this behavior.
Thank you. So we'll have a 5-minute discussion. Candidates can only speak for 45 seconds uninterrupted. Then I'll cut you off. Anyone may begin.
So building on my last point, having the mechanisms in place, because the reality is, a year down the road, 2 years down the road, we don't know who's going to be the executive. We don't know if they're going to address these issues. That's why I want to create issues policies that are effective, so that, maybe we don't get a person within our executive that is adequately addressing these issues, but we have the mechanisms in place within our union so that students can go and use those mechanisms to address these issues. Because, maybe there is a time where these students who are marginalized can't always rely on the union. And so having these mechanisms in place, not only within the union, but also outside the union in the university administration.
And just to build on what a lot of folks have said, but to differentiate that racism, especially anti-Black racism, is not so explicit as graffiti on the wall. Anti-Black racism lives through our everyday actions, and whether we know that we're doing it or not, folks still have those experiences. And so that means, for instance, last election, there was a lot of anti-Black racism from candidates, from the system, from the community, and that takes form in perhaps not clapping for the Black folks in the room. That can take form of assuming that a Black person understands what every Black person's experience is. And also, I'd like to point out, I'm not Black and I don't have that lived experience, but it is through listening and constantly engaging with these communities to hear what they need for support that makes me feel so angry and constantly aware and constantly working towards so that doesn't happen again. But it's quite naive to think that it won't.
I think that along with the amount of infrastructural work that needs to be done so that people aren't overlooked and people aren't left out and people aren't overtly or subtly subject to racist comments or racist behaviors, I think that people need to understand, especially like people of my white privilege region of the spectrum, that there's so much emotional work that we can be doing to be better. That there's so much support that we can be lending to people who need it and who want it, and or who, even if they don't want it, you should support them anyways, because the reality is that we're all here, we're all community, and we should all support each other. And yeah, it just blows me away that that's.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd also like to just add that I think a great opportunity to kind of work on this issue would definitely be starting from the beginning. So starting from when students get here, analyzing, understanding why this, not why this sort of thing happens, but exactly what can be done to educate students at the beginning, and then understanding how to both deal with prevention, but also education of these situations. So microaggressions, both explicit and implicit, of course.
I think also really some simple things. I know bringing food to folks on campus if they're really not in a great place because of racism they've experienced, regular check-ins, supporting, making, and also in our capacity as student leaders, ensuring, like many folks have mentioned before, that that there are institutional things to fall back on if there aren't individuals or you can't advocate for yourself at that time, making sure that there are things that students can lean on.
I'd like to expand and say, building infrastructure. When I was representing Indigenous students prior to my campaign did not have a place to smudge on this campus. We have a no smoke policy on this campus. I made a campaign so that we can create a space. I would want to create that space for Black students. I would want to create that space for international students. I would want to create that space for every student who is marginalized, who is of a person of color, so that they have this safe space that they can go to. Because, the union didn't do it. I had to go to the administration to build this. And so as your president, I would build this infrastructure because we have the power within the union to build this infrastructure in this place.
Thank you, candidates. That was a great discussion. We'll move on to the next question, and Jennifer, you'll be first. Jennifer, please describe and demonstrate your ability to work with and represent diverse racial backgrounds.
Okay. Personally, I've never had an experience where I haven't been able to work with somebody due to their racial background or their cultural differences. On Sexton campus, we do a lot of group work, and a lot of our students are very culturally diverse. For example, I'm doing a senior project right now with a girl from Bangladesh and a guy from Nigeria, and someone also from Quebec who's very French. And a lot of the time there is some cultural barriers or some language barriers that have to be worked past, but there's no point at which you can't work past that if you're willing to. And I think it's important to make sure that you're not accidentally overlooking somebody or accidentally or even intentionally overlooking someone, because that is the thing that some people do, and that's not okay. So for me, I like people in general, and I like to take everything they say into account. I think it's important that they get to voice their opinions.
Thank you. Isaac, same question.
Can you just say the question again?
Of course. Please describe and demonstrate your ability to work with and represent diverse racial backgrounds.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was working with the Dartmouth North Community Food Center, that was a big issue, was kind of creating menus and things that were actually culturally diverse and actually applicable to people. So that was a really fun and enjoyable experience working there. I don't know if, so that was a very enjoyable experience, and hearing from those experiences and actually listening was, again, a huge part. So that was a great opportunity to develop my listening skills and actually hear how to do that sort of thing.
Thank you.
From my experience, again, I'll expand. I think I've shown on this campus to create diverse, equitable space for Indigenous students, and the working groups that we created through these, by building a place to smudge, there was a diverse group of people within that. There was a diverse group of people when we built the team to put up the flag, because we recognize there's a reality in that there's many different people, and so we work collaboratively, and going beyond just putting the Mi'kmaq flag, we also decided let's put up the Nova Scotia flag, recognizing the diversity of Nova Scotia through that. And so my ability, I think I've showed that through my position. I've showed that, I've worked in government. I worked in government this summer, working with a diverse group of people from all, walks of life in that place. So, having experience beyond just university.
Thank you. Mary, same question.
Yes, well, I've had the opportunity to collaborate with persons of diverse backgrounds, one example being my friends in the Disability Organization in Havana, Cuba, and more recently here at university, especially during my MBA program, because much of the focus on the business programs is teamwork. And there are many persons, especially international students, that are attending business school here on campus. I've made some very close friends over the years. I've met people from Mexico, from all, from many, many different countries. Also, I've collaborated and I've done social justice work with locally with African Nova Scotian families and individuals who are being persecuted by the justice system in this province.
Thank you. Katie, same question.
Yeah, first I'd like to recognize that the work that I really like to try to do is not patronizing, and it is not charity for a lot of these groups. And just even the idea of racial backgrounds is so complex, because for me, I have so many different heritages within myself, and so many folks also have that, whether it's their heritage, they may have cultural mixes in there, so that's also really important to recognize. And a general point that I'm running on is, well, one, a lot of this work isn't fun. And student rights are incredibly important, and that work is a lot of the time not fun. So this work in student rights can be seen in academics, student life, and personal life. So in academics, students have told me, the international students, main point, I'll get into the specifics later, but really equipping these students with resources and tools is incredibly important.
All right, so we'll move on to the next question. And Isaac, you will be the first one. What specific activity work have you previously done to support, address oppression experienced by, I want to make sure I say this right, BIPOC folks, LGBTQIA+ folks, femme folks, folks with disabilities, and folks of other marginalized identities? What would you do in your role to address oppression of marginalized groups on campus in your role?
I mean, not being a lot of those things, I actually don't know exactly what lots of those people want, right? So that's something I'm not able to actually speak for a lot of people that way, right? And so something I would need to do is actually find out what people want. And that's something that the DSU should do. It's a public good. It's good for everyone to know what every group on campus needs and wants. And that would be information that we need to make publicly available to our membership, obviously.
Thank you. Aaron, same question.
Can you say it again, because it's a bit long-winded?
Okay. What specific active work have you previously done to support, address oppression experienced by BIPOC folks, LGBTQIA+ folks, femme folks, folks with disabilities, and folks of other marginalized identities? What would you do in your role to address oppression of marginalized groups on campus?
I'll just use one example. This fall, I hosted, in partnership with the VP Student Life, Toxic Masculinity panel. And on that panel, we had individuals from the LGBTQ community, LGBTQ2+. We had Indigenous people, we had African Nova Scotian people. People were represented on that panel to discuss things. So I would create a space in which all voices are heard, that there's a diversity, and through the example of this panel, it was one of the most successful panels of the union in the whole fall. Going beyond that, my time on the DSU, I motioned continuously for structural change within policy to make sure that all these groups, BIPOC, LGBTQ2+, were represented within policy of the DSU.
Thank you. Mary, same question.
Well, I've been advocating and standing up for the rights of persons with disabilities, both on campus and in our community, for the past 20 years, and I've taken a lot of pushback on account of it too. And I have not been, well, let me just say that some people have deeply resented my advocacy on behalf of people with disabilities. And more recently, also, I have been very deeply involved in the case of a local African Nova Scotian individual who was being pursued and persecuted by the provincial justice system and the Nova Scotia Barristers Society. And I've stood up for his rights.
Thank you, Mary. Katie, same question.
Sure. So the first part of the question is, what is your previous experience? And so all of the roles and the positions I've held throughout my 4 years of DAL have been representative of all students. They're generally elected positions. And so I've had the confidence of all students on campus, or the students that voted, and as well as the confidence of marginalized communities when speaking about specific concerns to them and advocating for what they want to see in the university. And what would I do in my role? So I would specifically use resources that are for these targeted marginalized groups. And so that ranges from South House, the Survivor Support Center, and Avalon as things to consult with about LGBTQ+ and gender and sexual-based violence. Also, to increase more community within our DAL community is incredibly important, and we'll talk about that more later.
Jennifer, same question.
As Isaac said, I really can't speak for many people of many groups because I am not part of them, but when I get the chance, I always demand of myself that I try to speak truthfully and honestly and with fairness, no matter when or who I speak to. And when I can, I try to bring up issues that are not given the appropriate amount of attention, such as the Rohingya genocide that's currently happening in the Middle East, which is a huge issue, but not something close to home. And what I would like to do with a newfound position and a newfound platform is to make sure that people who are here actually have a space for their religious and cultural beliefs that is safe for them. Because I know on Sexton campus, there are several Muslim people and they like to practice their prayers together, which is wonderful, and I think it's great. But I know that a lot of the women have to do it in the locker room, and I don't think that that's fair, and they should have a space for that.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to move on to the next question. And this one we'll start with Aaron.
Sorry, I just have a question for the moderator. Are you just going to announce which ones will have discussions at the end? Okay.
Yes. So, Aaron, what will you do as the president to better represent professional students, e.g. law, dentistry, medicine?
I would build a relationship with them. One example, well, with dentistry and medicine, I've actually worked with admissions committee on dentistry. I've worked with curriculum committee in dentistry and medicine. I've been part of Indigenous curriculum forum or working group to instill Indigenous curriculum within those institutions. I've been involved in societies in medicine, and I would expand that to all graduate students. But not only graduate students, we need to look at mature students. Not enough is being done for our mature students. There's not enough resources for, maybe babysitting. There's no mature student society. Maybe we don't call it that, but there's no way for mature students and older students, whether you're a graduate or whether you're an undergrad, as a mature student, to, organize and support each other. I would, as president, look to build things like that.
Thank you. Mary, same question.
I absolutely agree that the concerns and the priorities of students in professional programs, and in particular dentistry, pharmacy, the medical professions, they tend to be overlooked by the DSU, rightly or wrongly. The student union seems to be more focused on undergraduate students, and tends to reflect, in its activities and priorities, sort of the lifestyle and the concerns of students that are 20 and 21 years old. I can certainly relate to the fact that there's no real voice or a coherent voice or a place to gather for mature students. So I would make it a priority to reach out to those groups and to learn what their priorities are.
Thank you. Katie, same question.
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Of course. What will you do as the president to better represent professional students, law, dentistry, medicine, etc.?
Sure. I think this is a really great question, and it holds folks accountable after the election is over and after we're done campaigning. I think professional students, especially across our campuses, look for support when looking for jobs or after university. That's incredibly important. And so what can the union do to facilitate more community connections and mentorship opportunities with those students in our programs, and also ensuring and following up on what type of accountability there is for discrimination in these professional schools, because as we can see, there's a lot of work still from Dell Dentistry a few years ago, and that's being seen a lot in our professional schools. And so also another thing, ensure the conversation is relevant to their program, I think is incredibly important, because advocacy for the professional programs looks different, and their schedules look different, and their priorities are different.
Thank you. Jennifer, same question.
Professional students have different priorities because as of the time that they graduate, they are the professionals, they are the upcoming experts. And I know in engineering, once you get out of engineering, you are then responsible for any project that you put forward. And however it affects people, it's on you. So I would like to see more support for those people, because that is a tremendous responsibility to accept as a student. And I think that having more opportunities to network with professionals in their preferred fields, as well as opportunities to have support from the university that fosters financial management options, knowing how to get into your first job and make sure that you're successful at it. All of these training tools that you don't get in the classroom, I think they should be provided by the university through conferences or through workshops, and finding out what they think is necessary, because maybe I'm overstating it. Maybe there's something else that they think that they need.
Thank you. And Isaac, same question.
So I definitely agree with with what a lot of candidates are saying about how the goals and kind of needs of graduate students and professional students are very much different. A lot of the time, just from my experience talking to professional students, it's very get in, get out kind of mentality, that you kind of want to get in, get your degree, and go do stuff, which is kind of what people in a professional degree want to do. So pretty much having a DSU that helps people do that as well as possible is necessary. Again, I'm going to say it again, actually surveying people. But I get more than just surveying, individual numbers, but again, having a real consultation with that. So that's something I haven't seen any numbers on for the DSU, or even the administration actually either. So it'd be nice to see that.
All right, thank you. So we're going to move on to the next question, and this one will have a discussion afterwards. Starting with Mary. How will you ensure students of diverse political beliefs are heard and represented?
With the DSU, I think it's unfortunate that diverse beliefs are sometimes labeled as being reactionary or being intolerant. And I think there has to be more room and more space for criticism. We hear a lot about intersectionality. It's being incorporated into policies and institutionally. And intersectionality is a theory, and I think that we sometimes forget about that. It's a very valid theory, but I'm finding
Thank you.
more and more it's being seen as
Thank you.
some sort of absolute truth, and there
Thank you,
is
Mary.
no absolute truth.
Okay, Katie, same question.
Yeah, I actually full-heartedly believe in the idea of intersectionality and how everything is connected, and we can't just act without understanding the repercussions it may have later on. And I think, the question is specifically political beliefs and how to ensure that they're included on campus. So we have a lot of incredible political societies, and they're very active on campus, and I think that's a great way for students to ensure that their voices are heard, and then they can also be a part of similarly minded groups. And I think that's, as a political science student, I love seeing folks being politically engaged. However, things within the union don't necessarily need to be politically influenced from any side of the spectrum, because we're also talking about all students, and that includes political beliefs. And I think no matter my political beliefs or anyone else's, I don't think that should influence the job. And I also like to recognize that diversity of opinion really does strengthen the conversation and dialogue, as long as we're not, infringing on
Thank
other
you.
people's rights.
Jennifer, same question.
When it comes to political beliefs, especially in the tense times that are happening here in Canada as well as in the United States and all over the world, really, it's hard to remember that you can't speak over somebody else's beliefs. Their beliefs are founded in something that you may not understand, you may not agree with, but their beliefs are still valid. Even if they don't make sense to you, even if it makes everything a little more complicated, it's worth it to have that conversation and figure out where the beliefs do actually intersect, because they do. At some point, all beliefs intersect. And it's important that while the DSU, as Katie mentioned, should not be influenced by political beliefs, it should be what's in the best interest for the most people as much as we can. And preferably that would be for all people. But sometimes it's just not our turn in the spotlight, and we have
Thank
to
you.
take a step back.
Isaac, same question.
Absolutely. So a couple of things. One, intersectionality is real. Two, the DSU is definitely there is politics is involved. It will always be influenced by politics. And I think that's the question that we're asking, is really, how do we involve politics? DSU is always going to be political. And it's been told to me that the DSU tries to be center on things, which I don't know if that's necessarily the best or the worst way to do things, but I think it's a thing that we've been doing. And so actually involving at all sides sometimes is good, sometimes is bad. In a way, we've actually become very polarized. And being polarized doesn't really have an opportunity for a good discussion. One of my fellow candidates was saying that sometimes they overlap, but sometimes they don't. And those are situations where we see these major tensions happening, is where people cannot agree. So finding a way to make those things agree, or finding a way to have those conversations separately and then coming together later, might be an option.
Thank you. Aaron, same question.
I want to expand from a point that I mentioned earlier, in that we need to dismantle the fringe of politics within our university, being the far right, being the far left, and making sure that the discussions had even within our council are adequate. And one way to do that is invoking Robert's Rules of Order to ensure that the debates and discussions had are fair, are adequate, that have a diverse opinion within our council. Like I said earlier, I would use a policy review committee to make sure that every student had the opportunity that, any motion that the union brought forward to the Senate or to BOG or our own council, that students had the ability to discuss those points. Also, making our counselors more accessible. Currently, they're not very accessible. Not a lot of students know who their counselors are. Invoking mechanisms so that individuals know who their representatives are on council.
Thank you. All right, candidates, you'll get 5 minutes to discuss, 45 seconds max uninterrupted. As soon as the 45 seconds are done, someone else may jump in. If two people attempt to speak, one will go, and then the next will follow immediately after. Whoever may want to start can start.
I would just like to comment on a point that Aaron just made concerning Robert's rules. Now, I believe you said, Aaron, that Robert's rules could be used to facilitate discussion, if was that correct?
Yes.
As a positive good. But I remember when I attended the very controversial now Halifax Pride annual general meeting, I heard several voices there condemning Robert's rules and saying that this was a very oppressive tool that was being wielded to nullify and negate diverse voices. And I saw that myself in action, actually.
That's
when
45.
I was on council, I saw Robert's rules being
That's
manipulated.
45.
In response to that, I was there too. I opened that event, and actually, you know, what happened in that meeting was they went off of Robert's Rules of Order. Robert's Rules of Order then dismantled within that meeting, and then the chair of that meeting actually said, "Oh, it's not within our Constitution to have Robert's Rules of Order," and then so the whole meeting was then disrupted, and then they decided, well, we weren't following Robert's Rules of Order this whole time. That they were not following Robert's Rules of Order in the AGM. And I was there, I opened it, trying to create a space on a very polarizing issue. And so yes, you know, we can use this in a positive way, but it has to be known. Our chair has to understand Robert's Rules of Orders, and the same with our
That's
council.
45.
Yeah, just talking about like facilitating these conversations. Robert's Rules has its place and it has its time, and it's incredibly important to recognize how sometimes that type of order is important to conducting the dialogue and carrying on the conversation. However, we are having very new conversations and very, very, very difficult topics that are personal to a lot of the people participating. And so when we have those complexities existing in just the conversation at hand, we have to look beyond more than just conventional ideas of how to facilitate meetings, and that goes beyond Robert's Rules. It doesn't mean excluding it or not using it. It's just how can we incorporate other forms of facilitation that also...
That's 45.
Can I respond?
If anybody can respond.
Yeah, I can, from my experience, I've gone beyond that. I've gone beyond Robert's Rules of Orders. I've hosted countless talking circles on this campus. Talking circles is my Indigenous methodology through my teachings on how we can have an appropriate discussion so that all opinions are heard. Yes, we can have that. My campaign for DSU's 100 Days of Listening, if we agree that, you know, the students say, maybe we don't want Robert's Rules of Order, we can find a way. Currently, as stated in the bylaws, we have to follow Robert's Rules of Orders, but yes, I've gone beyond that. I've physically done things on this campus to have discussions. Example, talking circles.
That's 45.
I think the fact that we have so many politically motivated societies here at Dalhousie is great. And I think that part of the current issue is that the people who are not part of those societies may feel that their political beliefs never get heard. And having a suppressed political belief means that chances are it's not going to come out at a productive time. So I think maybe we should institute a time where we actually give a productive atmosphere to have these conversations where nobody is feeling pressured or personally attacked. And I know that's hard because a lot of political issues are so very personal for so many people, but we have to start somewhere.
There's 38 seconds left if anybody wants to say anything.
Yeah, just to kind of build onto that, what you were just saying, Jennifer. Definitely creating space for everyone to kind of actually talk things out. Things sound a lot less logical when you actually say them to someone else and you can actually have those discussions. But it is true that in all aspects, suppressing anything will just make it become stronger. So I think dealing with this in a kind of adult way would probably be the best way to deal with this.
I also think too often we start new structures or implement them and have no initial education on why we need them in the first place.
That's time. So we're going to move on to the next question. This one will have no discussion. So start with you, Katie. How do you plan on straddling the role between being an advocate for students in your capacity as DSU president, while at the same time recognizing that you have a fiduciary duty to the university in your capacity as a member of the Board of Governors?
Oh, what a question. Literally, I ask myself this every time I go to a board meeting, a board committee meeting, and honestly, this is something that's been spewed at us as students for so many years on the board, and it comes with changing the atmosphere and culture of what the relationship between students and board members are and the high administration. And also, advocacy for students, I think, can also be incorporated in how we have conversations, and it's very strategic on how we bring those up and how we are ensuring that they're talked about at our tables where the decisions are being made. So straddling the role between advocacy and our fiduciary responsibility to the university, I don't think should be so separate, and I think it should not only be students bringing how they should be connected, it also should be the university recognizing that it's not a one-way street. We're students, we're paying to be here. We can't always advocate every single day, and it also requires effort on behalf of the university to be a part of this really great relationship that I think can make Dalhousie an incredible university.
Thank you. Jennifer, same question.
I think it's important to work against the infantilization of students, because we've been students since we were 5 or 6 years old. So when people who are administrative people who do this every day, day in, day out, and who have adult lives that are outside of school, it's easy for them to put us in a box where we don't know what we're talking about. But the thing is, this is actually our lives every day, day in and day out, and that should be considered by these people, and I would like to advocate to them that is something that maybe we could work on changing, that we could work on restructuring an infrastructure that takes into the account that we are adults, that we do have a voice, and that we do have opinions about where our lives are going. Otherwise, we would not be here.
Thank you. Isaac, same question.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I agree with Katie on the sense that the difference between the president's fiduciary responsibility to the union, or everyone's fiduciary responsibility to the administration, and our work to advocate should not necessarily be so separate. So definitely having a voice in what our money is doing and how we're dealing with our money is important. But at the same time, I don't think that should necessarily jeopardize how we advocate with for students with the administration. I think becoming more independent as a union is useful. And again, I think having numbers, again, to back up what we want is a good way to actually efficiently channel our resources into the things that we want to do.
Thank you. Aaron, same question.
I think one of my main platform points directly answers this question: building relationships with you, for you. Systematically going out, building relationships with students, maintaining that student side of myself if I were to be elected president, but building relationships for you. I believe I've done that, through my work with the vice provost. I've worked with the president's office. I've worked on Senate. I've worked within committees on Senate. I've maintained, I've done work. I've built relationships. And I guess, earlier Katie had mentioned, we have a Board of Governors caucus. Yes, we do, but how transparent is that Board of Governors caucus? Building the transparency of that caucus so that students have a say, students know what our Board of Governors individuals are physically doing in the Board of Governors.
Thank you. Mary, same question.
I apologize, but would you mind repeating the question?
Not at all. How do you plan on straddling the role between being an advocate for students in your capacity as DSU president, while at the same time recognizing that you have a fiduciary duty to the university in your capacity as a member of the Board of Governors?
I don't see a real conflict there. Quite honestly, I know that the administration, and perhaps it would include some members of the Board of Governors, may have a paternalistic attitude. I think more generally, I've seen a paternalistic attitude on the behalf of administration toward students. However, I'm a mature adult, so I speak to these individuals more as a peer and not as a student. So I don't see a real disconnect there or a conflict, quite frankly. I think what is most important in our relationship with the administration and the Board of Governors is the tone you give is the tone you're going to get.
Thank you. All right, so we're moving on to another question. We are very pressed for time, and I want to make sure a lot of questions are being asked. So we're gonna. It is 7:42, and we would like to end as close to 8 as possible.
Okay.
So we're gonna try to not do as many discussions. So we'll start with I believe it's Jennifer.
Yeah.
I believe
Katie
yes.
first last time.
Okay, so. What do you think of the current student code of conduct complaint process? How can the university better support students who have been harassed and or assaulted by another student?
I think that there is a lot of stigma around people who experience violence and who experience harassment, and that our system does not acknowledge that at this point. It tries, and they've been working towards it, and I think it's a battle that we need to continue to fight, because as of right now, the access to services that not only are available to you, but feel comfortable to you, and where actually you want to tell somebody that this has happened to me, I feel really unsafe here on this campus, that shouldn't be something that's almost as hard as the experience you went through. Because I know it's like reliving that experience to talk to somebody about something awful that happened to you. And I think that we should be doing more to make sure that those people are heard in an atmosphere where it's okay if they don't want to go forward with something, if they just want to be heard, or if they do want to go forward with something, they should have that support unequivocally.
Thank you. Isaac, same question.
I can just say a couple things. One, it's not good enough. What happens is you either have a situation where someone is accused of something, by the university, or someone goes to it, they go through the process, and it can become an entire feedback loop, a positive feedback loop of that person if a person is wrongfully told that they've broken something, they can become kind of victimized by that. I would also just say that on the flip side, it can also not address the issue enough. It can either over-address the issue or under-address the issue. Sexual assault survivors on campus are not fully supported. And this is evident in that we don't see much action actually taken by the administration. This is something that I personally feel very strongly about. I think that we would definitely need to work on and implement that into the student code of conduct more.
Thank you. Aaron, same question.
On the team that I've helped build with the Vice Provost of Student Affairs, this is an issue that we've been directly looking at. How can we revise and how can we interpret the current state of the Student Code of Conduct? My first critique of the university is that, we've had cases on this university where the confidentiality was not maintained of the individuals within that process. I would advocate to make sure that confidentiality is maintained so that students are not hurt further. I would also address issues around international students. International students are disproportionately represented in student code of conduct issues and, academic discipline issues. I would also make sure to have these policies, sexual assault policy, survivor-centric.
Thank you. Mary, same question.
Well, I've thought a great deal about the student code of conduct, and I've asked myself, why is there this institutional assumption that it's always going to be the students who are not behaving appropriately? Why is there not a staff code of conduct or a faculty code of conduct, for example? Because I've been treated very disrespectfully by some faculty, and I've thought about that, and there didn't seem to be any real mechanism of recourse for those experiences. I think it's also rather problematic that a student can be convicted, if you will, on the balance of probabilities, because that is the standard that is used.
Thank you. Katie, same question.
Yeah, I would really like to emphasize how important proactive effort is when we're addressing code of conduct issues, and how we can create shifts on campus where we will have less and less code of conduct issues. And so how we can teach students how they can incorporate these principles and values into their everyday life as students on campus and off campus, because we're representing our university in our academics, in our student life, and in our personal lives. And so what type of tools can the president and the executive, as well as the union, equip our students with when battling with code of conduct issues? And so we have our incredible Dalhousie Student Advocacy Service and Ombudsman person that are relatively new to our university, and those are really great initiatives and services that the union offers. And I think accessibility to those services needs to increase, and students' unique needs also need to be recognized.
Thank you. So we'll move on to another question. So we only have time for 2 more questions, so this is the last 2 that we're going to do. So we'll start with you, Isaac. Since the president also represents the DSU and students at a national level, what is your action plan to advocate for students and student issues beyond the Dalhousie University community?
Well, that's a very timely topic right now because of the federal budget. So taking a look at the federal budget, there's some information about, they're adding a lot to funding schools, so getting our slice of that would be really nice. I think a big part of that would definitely be advocating for the awesome research and conferences that happen here at Dal. Big thing that happens, especially for engineers, that just happened recently was was their 50th, I think, anniversary conference for the Canadian Federation of Engineering Students. Getting big events like that, that are national events, advertised at Dalhousie, and being proud of the awesome achievements that our engineers and other professions and faculty are making would be awesome. And getting that, maybe even getting like funding and investment for people coming out of those would be awesome. So, yeah, sorry, that's good.
So, as my campaign is saying, building relationships with you, for you, building relationships with provincial governments, with MLAs, building relationships federally with MPs. My experience working in Ottawa, I built relationships with MPs while I was in Ottawa. Physically going to Ottawa. Our university president goes to Ottawa almost every month, and our DSU president does not go to Ottawa. Why can't our university or DSU president go to Ottawa and lobby the government with our university president, work together with our university president, to tackle issues like the recent proposed tuition hike, 3% tuition hike? Where's that in the news? It recently came out in the back report. And what our university president has said is that it's an issue not within our own university, but within the province. So let's work together. Let's lobby the government with the university. So actually building key relationships that are successful.
Thank you. Mary, same question.
Yes, I'd like to endorse what Aaron just said, and I'm mindful of the fact that Dalhousie is a public university. It is funded by billions of taxpayer dollars. Well, the provincial government controls billions of dollars of taxpayer funding, which is in the form of transfer payments from Ottawa, which is then distributed according to a formula among Nova Scotia's post-secondary institutions. So I think a very important role and relationship should be cultivated with both provincial and federal politicians and decision makers. And I'd also like to see stronger relationships with universities abroad and Dalhousie.
Thank you. Katie, same question.
This question is super exciting because I think it means bringing the DAL community to the rest of Canada and bringing Canada to the DAL community. And this, like previously mentioned, you can start by connecting with more universities, but this also gives unique opportunities for students to travel to different universities, whether that means funding a conference or students to go to a conference in Montreal for Model United Nations, or by bringing incredible speakers to our campus, like we're doing for the DAL 200th anniversary. Also, perhaps engaging in larger national conversations on campus and bringing people into a conversation outside of the classroom and in our student union. And an example, I think, of how I'll directly engage students about national issues is knowing your rights as Canadian citizens, knowing your rights as an Indigenous person, knowing your rights as a permanent resident, knowing your rights as an international student. And so being able to have a deliverable for students to really not only see, but engage with.
Thank you. And Jennifer, same question.
I think it's important to remember that there's so much that we can do as students to represent ourselves and our university in the local and national and international community. And I think that our school should support us doing that, such as, international internships where you go to either other universities or you do environmental work or innovation work, wherever it may be. Like I know there are some in Germany as well as Greece and all over the world, actually. And also I think that the things such as like Engineers Without Borders, Doctors Without Borders, Habitat for Humanity, all of these things that go other places should be better supported by our university because they are representing us there. As long as we are understanding that we are visiting someone else's territory and that we should be respectful of the way that they do things. Because I think that just because we're going doesn't mean that we shouldn't recognize that we are all citizens of the world as well as the citizens of the Dalhousie University community.
Thank you. All right, so this is the next and last question, and Aaron, you will go first. A lot of efforts are put into first-year students with O-Week and specific academic programming. How will you ensure that all students of all years are supported from second year and beyond?
Through DSU's 100 Days of Listening, systematically going out, being a part of O-Week as your president, being, why can't the president be a leader or intertwine, go with first years, that's the first year basis, but expanding it beyond that, helping our student life, building partnerships there, so that the president is present, being at events on all levels for mature students, graduate students, undergraduate students on every level, physically being there. Perhaps we can utilize our secretaries within the executive office, to help communicate better with our executives so that students can efficiently outreach and reach our executives and perhaps meet with them. Open door policies, that's what I would have if I were president.
Thank you. Mary, same question.
Well, I think that student union counselors and the executives should make more of an effort to engage with first-year students, and especially during orientation, and perhaps a mentorship, or not a mentor so much, but a partnership with more mature students in fourth year who could connect with especially students coming in from elsewhere, helping them to get oriented, talking to them about the DSU, encouraging them to get involved with the DSU. There are many opportunities that can be done, and perhaps even implementing pop-up town hall from time to time with new students.
Thank you. Katie, same question.
Could you repeat the question for me?
Of course. A lot of efforts are put into first-year students with O-Week and specific academic programming. How will you ensure that all students of all years are supported from second year and beyond?
Sure. Well, I have a really cool example. So I was the president of DAS, as well as on their executive from 2014 to 2017. And a really incredible program that a colleague and I put together in the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences is the mentorship program. And this, we put together a proposal for our faculty for $18,000 from our Strategic Initiative Fund to establish this short-term, but could be long-term initiative to engage all students, and specifically in arts, and over all years. And so this type of mentorship program provides opportunities, whether you're in first, second, third, and even fourth year. So for instance, if there's a fourth year mentor and you're wanting to go into honors, this is an incredible way to engage not only students, but engage students with their peers. So I'd really love to help other faculties try to facilitate something similar, or something more applicable to their faculty.
Thank you. Jennifer, same question.
So, as I mentioned before, I did a BSc first at St. FX. So when I came to Dalhousie, I was actually a third-year student. I knew very few people here, and because I'd done 4 years at St. FX, all of my friends had already graduated from Dal. So I've thought about this a lot because I spent a lot of last year being very alone until I managed to make friends in my particular program. But I think it would be important to maybe institute something that is shorter than O Week, but similar to O Week for people who have just declared their program, who are new to their classes that they're going to. That maybe it's something on the first weekend that isn't during classes, that they don't have to miss classes, that they get to go and experience just this big activities day with all kinds of icebreakers, and then having this extend throughout the year with activities that are unilaterally for everybody.
Thank you. And Isaac, same question.
Great. Well, I would first definitely refute the idea that first-year students are necessarily treated with more. I've actually had very many personal discussions with first-year students this year that they do not feel represented. They do not feel that they have a place at the DSU at many levels. But to continue from there, I think we need to actually tailor the services the DSU provides and supports to actually tailor those things to what students want. So conversations we've been having are things like having a practice space for music that the DSU runs. I don't know if any of you play drums, really hard to find a place to play drums in the city. It's those kinds of things. Or if you wanted to cook on campus, it's also really hard to find a place to cook on campus. Again, the International Center has that, but there is programming. It's things like this that we can actually provide that are like actionable. Like it's not crazy, unbelievable things. It's very implementable things that we have the space and the facilities and the resources to do next year.
Thank you. All right, well, that was an excellent debate and time. I'm going to give the candidates 1 minute for closing statements. Mary, you can go first.
Is it just 1 minute? Okay, I'm a mature student. I have been at the Dalhousie campus since 1993. I have a very broad base of knowledge. In addition to the 2 degrees I've completed here, I've taken many different courses. I've met hundreds upon hundreds of people. I believe in the past year, the DSU has lost its way. It has estranged its constituents. I want to implement a stakeholder approach on behalf of all Dalhousie students if I'm elected president. And I would like to make the offer, if I am elected, that I will donate $10,000 of my salary to the Dalhousie Student Union Food Bank, which will have a direct measurable impact. And I believe there has to be more consultation
Thank you.
with the student body.
Thank you. So now we'll do Aaron.
Okay. Any reason for the change up?
What's that?
Any reason for the change up?
For
Oh,
what?
never mind. Yeah, okay, I'll go.
Humor.
Yes. So back to my platform points: building relationships with you, for you, DSU's 100 Days of Listening, building a stronger Dalhousie, building a stronger DSU, and increasing the accountability of our DSU. And so I really, my dream, my vision for this union is that we can build a union, we can build a stronger union for all students here, and a union that's envied by the rest of the country, and in internationally. We need to build that union, and we can. And going beyond that, building a stronger DSU, building a stronger university, not just our generation, but the next generation.
Thank you. Isaac, closing statement.
So big issue that's been kind of over my head this entire time has been the idea of making the DSU relevant to students. And making the DSU relevant to students is listening to students. A lot like what Aaron just said was consulting with students. But in many other ways, it's also making sure that tomorrow, meaning next year, the things that we do are actually actionable. But then it's also planning for the future, being strategic, and having that information, the data, and the consultation to be able to go, what will we do the year after that? A big issue is definitely restructuring the actual union, like the actual executive and things like that, so that the year after and the year after, it can actually be a sustainable solution to governance and being able to have voices heard on campus. Thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer, closing statement.
I decided to run for DSU president because, for me, the student experience isn't good enough, and it should be better. And I want to work towards making it better for the next students that are coming, for the students that are going to change the world for tomorrow, including us as well, obviously. But we want to leave a legacy here. This is our school, and we should make it something that we are proud to be a part of. So that's really what I'm here for.
Thank you. And Katie, closing statement.
Yeah, I definitely agree and could echo a lot of things that people have said. But I think before Pride and before we want to move forward, we really need to address some very basic issues. And that's just talking to students and being able to engage with them. And so just highlighting, because I definitely ran out of time at the beginning, the three main points, and they're not even points, they're just themes because they play out in just so many different ideas. So governance, community, and rights. And so I want to really be able to create the society, the student union building where we're sitting in is more of a hub. And engagement across campuses has become just so obvious and often ignored, as many folks have mentioned earlier. And I had the privilege of going to the agriculture campus. Shout out to the Aggies, because like none of the questions were asked about them. And I think like that just goes to show like out of sight, out of mind. And so just constantly being aware and constantly having these important conversations.
All right, thank you, candidates. That was a wonderful debate that we had. I want to thank everybody that came out to support their candidates and everybody that watched on the live stream. I'd like to let everybody know that the next debate is tomorrow from 5 to 8 in the tea room. It will be the Vice President internal debate. We hope to see you guys there. We hope you guys vote in the election. I want to thank the elections committee members and the CRO for everything. I'm Mark Joyce, the moderator, and have a good night.